reports. I'm not going to read it in its entirety. It's already in the agenda. Also, a statement on videotaping. Obviously, we have a video webcam that sort of broadcasts our meetings, so we are videotaping. And Also, I'd just like to bring out the attention to the sunshine law and public comments. I did that already, sorry. And then finally, no smoking or vaping on school grounds. So I appreciate that. Before we get started with our official agenda, let me ask if everyone would please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you guys like to lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance tonight? That'd be great if you would mind. If you don't want to, it's okay. Thank you, Ms. Seward, for helping them.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, our agenda tonight is going to bring us first into an executive session, so can we please have a resolution to move us into, motion to move us into exec? Ms. Gandhi? Second. Thank you, Dr. Miskowitz. All in favor? Any opposed?
Does anybody in the public have any public comment?
That's fine, all right.
Because it's not.
Before we do move into exec, rightfully so, I was asked if we should sort of consider the fact that we have people in our audience say if they would like to make any public comments before we go into exec. We don't want to keep you waiting. No? Okay. Thank you very much. Then motion to move into exec is carried. We will go into exec.
Palomo,
Here.
Mrs. Carrero,
Here.
Mrs. Gandhi,
Here.
Mr. Hyatt,
Here.
Mr. Olansky,
Here.
Dr. Miskowitz,
Here.
Mrs. Seward,
Here.
and Mr. Cohen.
Here. Thank you,
And
everybody,
I'm here
welcome
too.
back.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, I thought you
I didn't hear it. Anyway.
I listened for Mendez first.
We good? Thank you. Okay. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for everyone who stayed and waited for us. I appreciate that. I am going to just make one clarification. Before we broke for executive, we did do a public comments, but I understand we have somebody else who has signed up for public comments. So I'd like to give them a chance when we're just going to do announcements first, and then we're going to do public comments again. So you don't have to wait till after the budget presentation. You'll have a chance to speak beforehand, okay? And that does not mean that we won't do another public comments if we have to toward the end of the meeting. But just want to make sure everyone has that opportunity, okay? We're going to begin with announcements. Mr. Malone?
I do have an announcement. Haven't been outside for a while, but from what I understand, it has begun snowing. So tomorrow we will be in a 2-hour delayed opening.
Thank
you.
you. Anything else?
No, sir.
Mr. Carabello, you have something.
Sure. So just to update the board, so as we discussed in the last budget presentation, so we did submit a exploratory proposal letter to the Monmouth County Improvement Authority for the capital projects consisting of the HVAC improvements at Robertsville and Asher. So we basically sent them a letter, basically almost like a plea or basically an inquiry to see if they would be able to work with us with one of the options that we had stated, which was going through them for bonds, almost like a de facto referendum through them to try to finance the 2 elementary schools left through debt service. So we sent the letter on January 22nd. We haven't had a response back, but usually we like to give them right about until now 2 weeks, and then we'll follow up with their office with a phone call. So if we receive anything, we will report out.
Thank you. We're all looking for good news on that one. Okay, I have one announcement, and I think it's something that obviously is very important to our town and to our district. And it's about the recent decision that we received from the appellate division on 5756. I would like to say that I know this issue predates my attendance on the board, and I know how important and how emotional this issue has been for many people, board members, prior board members, in our town. I will say that the appellate court, just so everyone knows, that the appellate court issued its decision yesterday regarding the appeal of the injunction related to policy 5756. Mr. Gross is here to keep me honest in case I misstate anything. The decision speaks to, from the injunction perspective, giving the board an opportunity to sort of, take action. And the action we can take was, we got good advice in the context of our executive meeting just now. I want to just say that, once the decision came out, I immediately, spoke to our attorney and asked him to sort of, prepare a briefing for the board, and he did. He immediately sent an email out advising us so that we knew what we were doing or what the decision said. But the fact that we had a meeting today, I thought it was important that, we withhold making any sort of public statements, at least from my perspective as board president, until in fact we were able to sort of be able to understand what options we had available to us. This is I'm putting this in context because this board has not had an opportunity to talk about 5756, although members of the board who from last year did have the opportunity. Myself and Ms. Carrero were not part of any discussions associated with this, so it was really important that we have a board consensus on the briefing. So that's one of the reasons why I have not made any public statements about this right now. And so let me just sort of, stand by what we're proposing to do as a board, so everyone's aware of it. We have been advised that we have 3 options going forward. Option number 1 is do nothing with the current policy as it stands. That is the policy that was passed in 2015, not the policy that was amended in 2023. Our Our second option is we can take the 2015 policy and amend it again, but that would be potentially subject to potential action from the state again, if they're not satisfied with what we do. And then our third option is to abolish or rescind the existing policy 5756. Whichever action we decide to take in the context of amending or rescinding, our bylaws, our policies require us as a board to have 2 readings, meaning we need 2 meetings in which a decision on abolishing the policy or amending the policy has to come forward with prior community notice. So the soonest we can begin to do something would be with our next board meeting on February 25th. And I want to let everyone know that is the intent of the board to have public notice and have a motion on the actual agenda for everyone to sort of be able to know to actually recommend that the board proceed with abolishing policy 5756. That will require a board vote. It will then come up again at our following meeting on March 11th, all right, for a second read. We'll do another vote, and then depending on how those 2 votes turn out, that will actually drive what the final result will be for policy 5756. So I think this is a strong and good statement on behalf of the board that we are finally given an opportunity to move forward on this policy. I want to thank the board members for the good conversation that we've had. I want to thank the board who worked so hard in the past to sort of address 5756. I want to thank Mr. Gross for his good legal counsel and the work he did to sort of represent the district during the November 19th hearing. And the outcome is probably what the best outcome we could have asked for, which is the ability to be able to move forward. So again, just so it's perfectly clear, right? We will have a motion on our agenda for next meeting dated February 25th, and that motion will be to abolish policy 5756. That will be the first read, and then there will be a second read on the agenda for the 5756 abolishment on March 11th. So with that, if there's anything that any of the board members would like to say, please let me open the mic for you guys. If not, we can just move on with our agenda.
I would like to say something and appreciate the conversation we all just had. I just want to, I know you thanked the board, so thank you for that, past and present. I wanted to just say the same because we spent years with this and pushing forward, whether people agreed with our amendments or not. I do want to thank the board members. We stood together and in the courthouse, we stood there wanting parents and families to be included. I want to thank the community members that, were vocal and shared their feelings and thoughts and sentiments on it. And I just wanted to thank you all because we really did want the ability to move forward. And so I say today is, a partial victory, right? That we could at least do something or propose something. And so I just wanted to share that because we spent a lot of time working on this and doing this together. Thank you to the administration. I know at the time we spent a lot of time in the policy meetings. And again, Mr. Gross, thank you so much because you really did a really great job when we were in the courthouse. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez. Anyone else want to add to their comments or thoughts? All right. Thank you, everybody, and looking forward to moving forward. We go now to public comments, or I'll say public comments 1B. Mr. Carabello?
Jennifer Woodruff? If I said that incorrectly, I apologize.
You said it right.
Okay.
Jennifer Woodruff, Morganville. You pretty much just summed up what I was going to ask because I had heard that something had happened with 5756, and I've been following it since the beginning, starting in the freehold. And you have worked so much harder on it, and I appreciate what you did, Mr. Gross. I was there at the meeting in Newark, and you presented yourself very well, and we appreciate all the board has done. I will tell the people that I know that hopefully will be helpful for the next 2 meetings, and I believe it's a victory. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Woodruff. Anyone else? Does anyone else want to say something?
Hey, how are you? Aldo Petruno, Morganville, New Jersey. So first off, Mr. Gross, I just want to echo the sentiments.
Can you pull that mic up a little bit? Thank you.
I just want to echo the sentiments that were just shared about the arguments that you gave in the courthouse in Newark. They were even in Freehold prior to that, but in Newark you really drove the point home, and it sounds like the message was heard by the judge. But in reviewing policy 131, can you just clarify for me if I understand the part about if you're going to revise the policy, it would need to go for a first and second read. But where in the policy does it show that you need 2 readings for an abolishment? I thought it just needs to be on the agenda for the next.
The second paragraph after the one about amending or establishing. Stand by.
The adoption, revision, abolishment, or suspension.
Bylaws or policies or regulations may be abolished at any meeting of the board, provided the proposed abolishing of the proposed bylaw has been approved by the board at a previous meeting of the board, which is the same language as the prior paragraph, 2 meetings.
So it has to be brought onto the agenda, approved, and then approved at the next meeting.
That's 2 meetings. Yeah. It's the
Okay, all right. Thank you for the clarification.
it's
Then,
the 4th paragraph in 131.
Yep, I got it right here. Thank you. Well, listen, I just want to, as a community member, this is something that, the board worked hard on. The administration worked along with the board, and obviously the board attorney, put his fair amount of work into it as well, especially in the courthouse. And having watched, I think, all of the board members that are on the boards now campaign, it sounded like everybody was, it sounded like the consensus was that everybody wanted to be the voice of the community and represent the community and parents and families, of the students. So I just, I hope that you take that into consideration when it comes time to vote on this, and that you abolish the policy as we were just given the opportunity to. Because when this was originally brought forth, it was considered a mandatory policy, and the board didn't. The board wasn't under the guidance that they had the opportunity to abolish the policy, which was why it was revised to include parental rights at that point and not abolish. So I just hope you guys take that into consideration, when the time to vote on it comes.
Thank you, Mr. Petruno, and thank you for your work on this as well.
Brian,
Anyone
can
else?
I just say one thing on that? I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Petruno, because I just wanted to thank you again, because you were on the policy committee with us, and we spent a lot of time there. Myself, Michael Alonsky, in year 1, I believe, is when we first started, and Aldo and Mr. Ballone, and at the time, other representation from the attorney. So I just wanted to again thank you, right? It's a lot of time and effort that is spent. I know we have the policy committee, we have a new committee now, and we'll spend our time together and all of that, but that was a lot of time and effort spent on these policies. So all of them take a lot of effort and time, and thanks. And I did say, again, partial victory, because we haven't abolished it yet, so we'll get there, but if that's how we all vote. So anyway, just wanted to say that piece. Thank you.
Thank you. No, anyone else? Okay, thank you all. We're going to move on. Next item on the agenda is the harassment and intimidation report. Mr. Ballone? Excuse me?
Motion to close public comment.
Oh, thank you. Motion to close public comment. Dr. Miskowitz? Ms. Seward? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Abstained? Public comments is closed. HIB report.
HIB report from January 17th, 2025 through February 6th, 2025. There were 6 incidents reported.
Thank you. Moving on to our discussion. Number 3 on the 2025-2026 budget. Mr. Caravello.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So this is budget discussion number 3. So tonight we're going to be discussing some of the options that we discussed last meeting regarding the HVAC plan that we're still on, the 3 to 5 year period. We're also going to discuss the curriculum department budget and the special education department budget. Here with me is Mrs. Tyrone. In the event that I cannot answer any of the special education questions, she would assist, and then Mr. Ballone will help in the curriculum side. If there are any questions that you have that I may not have the answers for, we can definitely get them for you. So starting off the, really it's the same sheet we showed you last time, basically showing you the options that are available to us and trying to finish this project. You have option 1, which is, excuse me, the second question, referendum. Option 2, which is basically do it how we have been doing it, save 1 to 2 more years and fund the project at 100% through district funds. Option 3 is your 5-year equipment lease, and then option 4 is what we discussed about in the letter, asking the Monmouth County Improvement Authority if they can fund the project, which is similar in structure to option 1. So option 1 is the only one that requires voter approval. The other 3 do not. They really just require board approval if we were to get the funding or how we would utilize the funding for that project. Some of the different incentives for the options is option 1 and 4 will actually fund it 40% through the state, through the debt service aid. So you're looking at only having to fund the balance of that $3.5 million that it's estimated to be at. Now again, that estimation is from last year, so it may have gone up. Not last year, but like basically early in the fall. So it may have gone up. I really don't anticipate it has gone up. The architect has stated that that is still an accurate number. But if you can get 1.4 million of that 3.5 funded through option 1 or 4, that would actually, you know, save basically almost paying for 1 with getting 2, and you would only have to fund the rest through either capital reserve or other avenues, which it would mainly be capital reserve because we don't see any other ROD grants coming down the pipeline or any other SDA grants that we were getting through a lot of the other HVAC projects. So as you can see, like row 4, so the balance of the funds it shows you. So option 1 and 4 are the 60%. Options 2 and 3 are a little bit different. So option 2 is it's 100% of our funds through capital reserve. You would need approximately about 3.5 million to dedicate out of capital reserve for that project. Right now, that's probably what our balance is about. It's a little bit lower than that, so we wouldn't even have enough to fund 2 schools. You would have to maybe only have to do, you could only do 1 and 1. But again, the reason we were trying to stick with 2 is because of the mobilization costs and having those 2 schools right next to each other. It's easier just to have the same contract to do that work. So that's an option. It's just a long game rather than trying to figure out a creative way to do it immediately. Option 3 is your 5-year equipment lease. Again, this is just stretching the dollars over a period of time, but there is interest attached to that. So right now the purchase leases are going for anywhere between 6 or 8%, so we average it about 7%, and so you're looking at $831,000 a year that you would have to budget over the term of the lease period in your operating budget. We did check with the county office to ask if we can pull that out of reserves and kind of almost play like a shell game where we pull it out of reserves each year and then just feed it back into the budget to pay for the payment. But unfortunately, the county BA actually said that we could not do that because it has to be an all or nothing project when it comes to utilizing your reserves for that budget cycle in that budget year. Option 4, the balance of the funds is similar to option 1 with the 60%, of course, coming out of the capital reserve in about the $2.1 million. So the 1.4 would be covered under that SDA, that debt service that we would be able to be eligible for, and then the 60% would be covered out of the reserves. So the last row is where it kind of gets a little interesting. So you have option 1 where the tax levy impact to the district is 0. So you can actually save money just by utilizing capital reserve and also going out to a referendum, because the capital reserve account would actually come out of the reserve, the funds would come out of the reserves, go into the budget, would never touch the operating budget, and then your referendum, if it was to get approved through second question, we'd get that funding through debt service aid or a different source, so that would not also come out of your operating budget. Option 1 and option 4 have the same impact. Option 2 does have a 0 tax levy impact, but again, it's not a creative way to try to utilize your funding or try to get some funding from a different source. It's solely coming from you and your reserve accounts. And then option 3, it does have an impact on your operating budget. You do have to budget for that lease payment each year, similar to what we do with the ESIP project. So we do that with ESIP right now, where each year we budget the principal and interest. I think it's an amortization schedule of about 20 years. Where I think we're on like year 4 or 5, where we just budget that payment each year in the 261, 262 accounts. You'll see it when you get your binders. So I just wanted to bring this back to the forefront, and I wanted to just see where everybody's stance was, because we do have to kind of make a decision soon, because the tentative budget is coming up. I would really like to go out to it for a second question. I know that's not something that is appealing to this town sometimes, but I think there would be a creative way and a fiscally responsible way to go out for funding through a second question and possibly get 40% of it covered by the state, where we would actually go further with our dollars that way, rather than just funding it out of a purchase lease or really just waiting. Because I know something is we don't really want to wait, because we have 2 more schools left. We don't want to just do 1. We want to do 2 at the same time. The waiting game, again, I have no issue with. We would just have to be very prudent in how we pad our reserves compared to our surplus, and vice versa, because we never also don't want to ever shortfall our base when we're building our budget.
I'm sorry, I have a couple of questions. The first thing is so if I'm hearing you correctly, your recommendation, you're saying, is try for option 1, right? And then I'll get to my other piece of that one in a second. But with all 4 of these options, and you may get to this, and I'm sorry if you are, you could tell me, hold off. Is there a timeline for each? Not saying I agree with all 4. I'm just asking, like, does it tell you somewhere else, like, if we did option 4, it would take this long versus this long?
Yeah, so option 1 is almost similar to me like option 2. So I would go out for a second question in November. If I don't get approved, then I know I have to save for my reserves, and I'm already a year into saving them and padding them anyway, because I didn't do anything with that money to begin with. Option 2 is I'm saving for a year or 2, just to pad my reserves to have enough money to fully fund it 100%. Where option 1, if it does fail, then you revert back to option 2, where we look at a different source. Yes, you have delayed it for a year, but also you gave it a try of trying to possibly get that 40% covered through debt service or state aid. I keep saying state aid, debt service aid funding. Where if that fails, option 2 is something that's down the pipeline, where you just have to save for maybe another year, or maybe we'd be able to kickstart it and do it in pieces, depending on how willing we wanted to start that project. Option 3 is something you'd be able to do right now, but I have to make sure I carve out about $831,000 in this operating budget to afford that. But also on top of that, you are paying interest on that. So you're paying, I think you're paying close to, I want to say like another $800,000 over the life of the project, or maybe $500,000 for getting that, where those don't have any interest attached to any of those.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then option 4 is a wishful thinking, and something that we would not have to go out for a second question for. We would just have to work with the Monmouth County Improvement Authority, work with the town and the Board of Ed, and then be able to get the funding just like in option 1 without having to go out for a second question.
Now, the other thing on the referendum, I'm just going to ask this. because I'm with you on that. If that's where we land, then I guess we'd have to develop some level of a communication strategy, because the Freehold Regional referendum was successful, but they had a variety of ways that they were communicating it. I saw people in the town were advocating for it, and so I know that that would be something we could discuss. I know it's not a board vote per se. I'm just curious to know what that would look like, but I know we're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, that would be something where it wouldn't be a heavy lift. We would just have to, we would all have to back it and be behind it, and we would all really have to be in agreement with that this referendum would strictly just be for HVAC. We wouldn't be shoving all these different projects in there. We wouldn't be shoving extra stuff. It wouldn't be like a wish list where, okay, we're going out for a referendum, let's just compile everything we can in there and let's see what we can get. It would strictly have to just be for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's what's happened in past referendums is we've always tried to squeeze things in and tried to get
Agreed.
approval of it, and the list got too long for people to buy in. I think one of the things would be just sticking to getting HVAC for Robertsville and Asher.
Yep. And my last question, I'm sorry, go ahead. My last question on this slide, I'm sorry. With the option 3 of the $831,650 per year, that's in addition to, let's say hypothetically you're like, hey, we need to almost recoup $1 million hypothetically. That would be in addition to that?
So
I'm not saying that you said that, I'm just thinking in my head for the math. Is there, the 831 is in addition to whatever other money almost you'd have to move around or so forth, right?
correct. So that $831,000 would go into the operating budget, and that would account for $831,000 out of your total budget. So I would have to carve out a section to fit that payment in each year.
Right, you might have to take from somewhere else to put it here.
Correct. So I may
Yep.
not be able to budget something if I know I have to squeeze that payment, because it'll be mandatory. I have to make that payment once I sign off on that lease.
Thank you.
Now, if state aid numbers were to come in and there would be an influx of them reworking the state aid formula, and we get additional money for special ed or transportation or something where we can actually recoup some of the funds we've lost and we have kind of a surplus, then option 3 would be on the table, and you could start it immediately, and we'd be able to budget for it. But that doesn't mean it's guaranteed every year that I'm going to have that state aid.
That's my question. So just so I'm crystal clear, option 3 and 4, option 4 I understand is a long shot. We could start this project immediately. Option 1, we're waiting at least a year because of November, then next fiscal year, which starts in July. And then option 2, we're waiting at least 2 years. Correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's important to sort of expectations, right? When we say start immediately, what does that mean? It doesn't mean starting tomorrow they're going to have a air conditioning service guy outside.
Correct. Yeah.
Putting in context
The timeline.
of the timeline, from the point in which the board says yes, and the money is in the pot to go forward to do that, what's the timeline from start to end? What's the estimated number of months or period of time to get that, to say that AC is working?
So just for like it in general?
In general, because it's the same for every one of them. It's just a matter of when you start.
Yeah, so if we were to build the budget and we were to take money out of the capital reserve, whether it be a portion of it or fully to fund it, excuse me, what would happen is you would see something on the agenda where we're approving architect and engineering company to come out and start developing the specifications for it. That would be usually in the spring, the summer, usually the late spring, and then by the summer, you'll probably be approving, or probably end of June. If we really want to kickstart this fast, by the end of June, you would be approving an awarded bid, a low bid for that project. And then once that project, gets approved by the board, then we would go in contract with that contractor. They would start ordering the units. They would start doing the work. Depending on how fast they can get the units, I mean, they're not doing, where there's just warehouses full of just equipment. They're producing them by orders now. So the lead time could be anywhere between 26 to 36, maybe a year when it comes to weeks, depending on how many units you need. And then what happens there is as they don't just take certain units in, they wait for the whole order and then they start. So you could be looking at this time next year where they would be starting for that project. So you may not even have HVAC for the full next school year until 26, 27, where it would actually be started up, because all that work would have to be done during the school year, similar to what Morel is doing now. because Marl's going to be starting up in about May. And we signed off on that last spring. So they're finally finishing that now because of the lead time of the units and having everything they need in to just completely finish the project.
So on the Marl perspective, it took 12 months from the point in which you began the procurement, awarded the contract, the supplier ordered the equipment, delivered it, and installed it.
Correct.
We're looking at 12 to 15 months minimum.
Right.
Okay. And then if we added to that the fact that if we went with option 1, the referendum doesn't go out until November, so we're looking at another 7 months, 8 months to get that done. Actually, it's February, so we're looking at 9 months. So that 15 months is now 24 months. We're looking at 2 years potentially, because everything gets pushed back, right?
Right.
Okay. And then, so that's an important point for us just to sort of understand. And then obviously if we waited another year or two for option number 2, that's just also added to the number of, to the overall length. And then obviously, as pointed out with option 3, if we had the money and we wanted to commit it, we can begin as soon as we wanted to. And just for reference purposes, so I'm just clear, the $831,000 a year we would have to pay if we leased it is roughly just about slightly less than 1% of our budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yet we only have a 2% ability to raise taxes, to increase taxes. So if we did option number 3, half of what we potentially could accumulate in additional tax budget money would go out to just the air conditioner.
But that's if you were to only budget for that. This
Right.
whole budget consists of
That's my
multiple
point.
things. Yeah.
The budget also includes other cost increases
That
associated.
are way over the 2% cap
Yeah.
that we're able to go up to.
Okay. And then if we wanted to go the referendum route with option number 1, I assume we have the ability to sort of be very concise, because we have a history already with how referendums do in our town,
Right.
right? We can be very concise and limited to just what we think we need in the context of the air conditioning, instead of throwing everything into that referendum and saying, oh, let's do all this other stuff while we're here.
Correct. And I think, just a little background, so we did an ESIP project. We were able to update a lot of items in this district. You know, roofs have been completed. Doors, we're just finishing up the majority of the door projects at one of the elementary schools, and that would finish the district. Boilers, hot water heaters, chillers. We've done a lot, fire alarm, burglar alarm. We've done a lot of stuff under that ESIP project, where old referendums used to try to fit those in, and what we did was we did an ESIP project to try to get around that, because a lot of that stuff was necessary and was becoming a huge safety issue just to operate and run schools. So with this, you really would just make it concise, and you would stick to just having that built in there. And I think if we are all behind it, I really do believe it could happen, because we have been very fiscally responsible here. We are one of the, probably if not the only Monmouth County school district that did not go up to 9.9% last year. So from that aspect, we're still running, we're still humming along, we're still doing what we're supposed to be doing, that's educating kids. And we did it with the budget we set forth last year. Again, there's a health benefit waiver, there's bank cap that we always try to utilize, because that's money left on the table, but we did not, we brought it up to you, but we did not come to you for 9.9%. We put it out there just to see how the board was feeling, but a lot of districts took that funding and were able to build their base. If we were able to do that, I probably would have been able to do option 3 and fit it in my budget, but unfortunately, if this is something that we want to see completed, these are some of the options that we would have to do. And I really do think just being smart with the tax dollars at work and just trying to get that 40%, it's worth the try to do, because if you don't, you're never going to know if you can get 40% of this project fully covered. And that would be huge, that you would only have to take out $2.1 million of your own funding from your reserves compared to 3.5 or possibly more. Because I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the bids would come in at. It might even be more.
So Vinny, just so I think so it's clear for everyone around the table, but also for everyone who listens to this meeting now and in the future. Option 1, we go out for, let's say, hypothetically, a referendum for $3.5 million. The state takes that and gives us 40% of the cost of the project.
Correct.
So our balance that we have an obligation to pay for is the 2.1 million. And right now, today, if we had to pay the 2.1 million, that money actually sits in our reserve, but we can assume that we would be putting more money into the reserve. So that means, from a taxpayer perspective, by authorizing us to move forward, there's a zero impact to the taxpayer as a result of the referendum.
Correct, because you would have a portion coming out of your reserve accounts that doesn't affect your tax rate, because that's your savings accounts almost, where you build your reserves, and then you would have the 40% being covered by debt service. And since this would not be till November, you would have basically another cycle, another year to build those reserves even higher, so you don't feel like you're depleting it completely with 2.1 million. You would fund more in there. Again, you'll see it in June. Usually that's a resolution. It says not to exceed. I'll usually put not to exceed $1 million in each reserve. It means I can go up to that depending on, when we finish our audit, how much our surplus is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody have any other questions? So I think going forward, if we are going to proceed with option one, what I would like to do is probably the next meeting, bring in some type of bond counsel just to really go over the process with the board, so everybody's in understanding of how it works, and really, you know, how the effort looks and how it's rolled out. And it's not really someone that'll be working for us, but they'll be taking the time to just basically go over how everything works for us. Again, we don't have to proceed with this, but I strongly recommend at least trying, because this way, if we can actually secure this, it'll go a long way, because we will be able to fund the project 40%. We've been creative with all the other ones when it came to funding it through ESSER funds or getting ROD grants, so I think we have to try to do it for these two as well.
So if, for option one, if for whatever reason that doesn't get approved or go the route that we want to, what would be the fallback? Option two?
So
Or
option
would it be
two,
option three?
option two, we're automatically doing anyway by building our reserves and saving. Regardless, option two is inevitable if we can't get one of those options, because what would happen is we're constantly saving in our reserve accounts each year. Eventually, we would have the balance to finish the two, and we would just do it, but it probably wouldn't be as soon as we would like. Option three, I mean, that's always on the table. If I get an influx of state aid where we have a lot of money where we have to balance our revenues and expenditure, we can put money back in the budget. That is absolutely an option to get it kickstarted immediately, as long as the board would be okay with paying interest. I don't like interest. I've never liked interest, but
And also, I just don't like the thought of, like, if we're, the 831,000, if we were paying towards something, it's gonna come out from something else. And I
Correct.
don't know, I don't wanna go the route of cutting things that are essential for the district. For option four, is that really that difficult for?
I think what's happening is the county, they're starting to turn districts away because it really is circumventing option one to go to the taxpayers and ask for their approval, because going through the town and the board, I'm being honest, I think they're just trying to steer away from the optics of almost going around. It was an option where they were doing it for some districts, but I think they're starting to pull away a lot of counties, or each county has their own. So we're hopeful that they'll reach out to us, maybe work with us. A lot of districts have asked for a lot. We're just really trying to do this one project.
Has the approving authority approved any other school districts yet from Monmouth County?
I believe a couple. I believe one of the correct. So there's different avenues of which you can apply. So if you have an approved referendum, you can get funded through them. They will certainly fund you through an approved referendum because they know you went to the taxpayer first. There's the other way where we're trying to go, where you wouldn't have to go out for a referendum. They're really staying away from those options now.
So sounds like we would be the first that they would do without a referendum.
Correct.
Yeah, that's not happening. Okay.
I have a follow-up question, sorry. So then if we do option one, can we try for option four at the same time?
Yeah.
Since
so we still have the letter out there, and we're still going to press them to just give us a response on, or maybe some feedback on what they're thinking, or if there's even hope of that even happening. But yeah, those go hand in hand.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I just
Just
wanted to
option one is a little bit more legwork, where we'd actually have to get a second question and get it on the ballot for November.
Okay.
And we would also have to, we're getting close, so I think by March, like, I would have to tell the county DA that we are moving forward with a second question, so they would have to know, they would have to approve it, and then we would have to go forward with it. And then if we do get funding, option 3. But I have no interest in interest, so.
Vinny, I know you said that the next steps, if we choose to go option 1, and I know you're looking for guidance from us, right? If you choose option number 1, then the next step would be to bring bond counsel in to sort of educate and brief the board, right? Are you suggesting that you would like a decision or some guidance from the board tonight on this so you can be able to move forward with bringing the bond counsel in, or are you suggesting think about this and we can decide at the next meeting, which is on February 25th?
So I would like to at least have everybody's feedback tonight, because I don't want to delay it any further, because the tentative budget's due March 18th, and if we are going to post a second question, we need to inform the county and then actually start the approval process for getting it on the ballot. So I would prefer to have a decision tonight. This way we can actually just kickstart it and have him start coming in and comprising the board, and then leading us into the right steps to actually be able to reach out to the community and basically create more avenues for, because this is going to be an ongoing discussion up until November.
And when you say, and I'm sorry to sort of belabor this point, but when you say a decision tonight from the board, I assume you mean consensus from the board of an interest to sort of begin to pursue the referendum, which would obviously trigger the next step, which is the bond
Correct.
council.
Just
There's no decision yet from the board.
No, there's no voting on anything. There's no approval. It's really just to just go around the table and pick which option suits you the best, and then that's the option we're going to really try to make work.
Okay, I'll pose the question to the board. Does everyone feel that they have enough information this evening to sort of at least give the direction that, so would we like to just, any other questions on the options in front? So,
I just want to also add that this came up in Buildings and Grounds in our committee meeting, and that if we're looking at an option where more time is needed, that we do have air conditioner units that were being used in old buildings that we could use in the windows for the time being, so that the students at Asher and Robertsville aren't in the humidity and the poor air quality. So I just want to make sure that they don't feel like save the best for last kind of situation. I also can't really give a full answer on whether or not I think the option 1 would be best without hearing from the bond advisor. So as I'm in favor of moving forward, I still don't have a decision until we hear the ins and outs of what that really looks like.
Okay, yeah, he would, the main part is he would really just go over the process of how it would work to get the question on the ballot and
Great.
what it's going to look like. We did go through direct install too. There's a second round. We looked to see if any of this would qualify, and unfortunately it's only existing equipment. So equipment that's really non-existent yet, there's really no incentives or rebates or direct install incentive to try to go through them.
I appreciate you wanting to get it done. Thank you.
So from a general consensus perspective, because I don't think we need a formal vote or a formal, so for option number 1, in order for Mr. Caravello to proceed with bringing in the bond counsel, is everyone generally in consensus that that should be our next step? Anyone against doing that or want to pursue a different option? Okay. I think you got next steps.
Okay, thank you. So I will reach out to him and have him at our next meeting. Okay, thank you. All right, that was only slide 1. I try to make this.
It is.
Right. So the next budget we're going to discuss is the curriculum department. So you'll see some just the heavy overview and the highlights of the variances from year to year. So you'll see textbooks have decreased 55,000. Your contracted online services have increased about 8,000. Your testing has increased about 43,000. Your curriculum writing has decreased 72,000. And the next slide we'll go over exactly the explanations for some of these variances. So your supplies and equipment have increased about 2,600. Your professional development has increased about 6,800, and then you can see your total curriculum budget actually has gone down, and that's really due to the textbooks and the curriculum writing really decreasing. So the textbooks, of course, is always based off of need. So last year we budgeted for a little bit more of new content, new updates. This year we're only doing maths grades 2 through 5, and that includes all the workbooks, online access, teacher resources, kits. So basically what we like to do with textbooks is we do payment plans to stretch our money out over time, similar to what we were talking about with option 3. So what we do is, in order to fund those textbooks and that series, we just spread it out over 3 to 5 years, and the textbook companies really work with us to really be able to budget and navigate that, because we need to update it. Your testing has increased by 43,000. This is really solely due to the addition of IXL for special education, and then you have the streamlining of the COGAT scoring for grades 5 through 6. Your contracted services have increased by about $8,000, and that's really just the annual increase that Genesis estimated us at for the following school year. And again, we went cloud-based with that, so everything is really supported by them, which is the reason for the increase also. Your curriculum writing has decreased. Again, that is based off of need for each year, so basically your summer work has decreased in 2025. There's not as much needed. And then your professional development has increased solely because we're swapping out programs, so we are trying to train for Reading Eggs, and that is actually replacing the program Smarty Ants. And if I'm not mistaken, right, Smarty Ants is a reading program?
Yes, for the younger students.
So does anybody have any questions about the curriculum budget?
Yeah, what was the
You'll get a lot more. Sorry, Danielle. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. I was just going to ask what the reason is for going back to Reading Eggs from Smarty Ants.
Smarty Ants is being discontinued. You're welcome.
And again, these are the highlights, the overviews. When you do get your budget, you'll have it line by line, and we will be able to go over basically almost every line that you would like. I do provide magnifying glasses, so if you need them when you come in to visit, we'll have them ready. We'll be Sherlock Holmes in it. So the next budget we're going to discuss is the special education budget. So just to give you kind of an overview of exactly what we're going to dive into with this budget. So we like to always start out with just showing you the pure numbers of special education. So we like to do almost like a year and a half in review. So you can see in September 2023, we had about 724 students. And then it shows your total students from Marlboro K-8 was about 4542, and that's really what was reported on that ASSA for that year. And then you'll see the ratio of how many special ed students compared to total population. So you see 15.9%. And then you see September 2024, which is what had just passed. It's this school year. It went up almost 31 students, and our general enrollment actually went down. So our special ed population went up, and our general ed enrollment went down. So there is a need where it seems to be that you need more funding, more sources to provide for this department. So you'll see the ratio, and then fast forward to where we are now. We took a snapshot basically of today, and you can see that is basically went up another 20 students, and our enrollment has also skyrocketed due to a lot of the residential developments that are coming into Marlboro. So the change from September 2023 shows you that 51 students have gone up in almost 15 months in special education, and sometimes those students have more needs than others, so unfortunately, I mean, you have to provide more funding sources to that one specific child or a group of children where, because the ratios in classrooms are different for special education than they are for general education, so more resources need to be compiled, and sometimes more sections need to be created. The amount of need there is. So this is also not accounting for the 45 students that we have in referrals right now. So if you take the 51 student increase from September 23 to February 2025 plus the 45, you're looking at almost what is that? It's like almost an 18-month span. You have almost 100 new special ed students that you need to now educate and find funding for. And this is, go ahead, Brian. This is one of the big things that came up in Trenton when we sat in this, basically the state aid plea about them doing the funding formula over, is every district got up and said, you do not give enough money for special education. You really need to revise the formula, and you really need to start funding it 100%, not prorated, not funded partially. It needs to almost be dollar for dollar, because a lot of funding is being allocated towards 775 students compared to 4574, and it is needed. It is needed. Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead, Brian.
So, just for clarification purposes, the 775 as of February 25 for students who are receiving special education, those are students who have IEPs, and this may be a Mrs. Tinarello question, right? It doesn't include any other students who have special education services. And
just so anybody can't hear, so they do not include 504 students. Everybody does have an IEP.
and that population raises the number of students from 775 to approximately, or about 1,000 total. And do we get funding for that additional 225 students from the state at all?
No. So everything is built into that special education aid that we receive, that categorical aid. The funding formula is still a mystery, the old one. We're hoping to get more transparency, more clarity on the new one and how it's built. But we have not gotten dollar for dollar for every student that we've had to provide services for, whether it be 504 related or IEP. Another avenue is extraordinary aid, but there's also thresholds. So you have to reach 40,000, you have to reach 55,000. 40,000 is for LEA special ed students, 55,000 is for out-of-district special ed students. And what happens is once you trigger that threshold, you only get the difference of what is after it. So they prorate it all the time, where I believe there's actually a bill that's trying to get legs from Senator Gopal, where they would actually try to fully fund extraordinary aid 100%. So that would, I think we put in an application of $2 million, and we got back $440,000 for all the basically all the expenses that we had associated, I think it was with 22 students.
I have a question quick for Mary Elizabeth, Ms. Tyrone, while we're here. Kind of bouncing back to the curriculum budget regarding special ed. What does IXL look like for special ed students? Is it like a generalized program? Because I just see that it's budgeted for the testing increase, so. Okay.
You are.
Mrs. Tinarello, if you want to join us next to Mrs. Seward, just in case you have additional questions, you're welcome to.
Can you actually repeat that? Because I just want to make sure that the parents at home know. I know, come on, it's just me.
Thank you.
I do have a question. Sorry, I do have a question. Is the increase in special education students strictly a result of population growth, or are we bringing more kids into the district that we otherwise couldn't have in the district?
So regardless if those children are in district or out of district, they're always included in this count.
Okay, that's a
Yeah,
good
so
point of
really this is what
clarification.
we're seeing is a lot of these developments going up, general ed, special ed. We just have an influx of students coming into
It's
into the
population growth,
district,
yeah. But we're paying for the students regardless if they're in district or we have to send them out. So.
Correct.
Could I just ask one question on the note about the new residential developments and accelerating the numbers? This is maybe not related so much right here, but is there any planning? I know you said enrollment was down overall. Is there any concern that we need to think about when you're talking about these new developments and the student ratio?
I mean, Mr. Balone and I, we work very close with the registrar as new registrations come in, and we always ask where they're coming from, like where are they living. And what happens is, we really look at the best situation possible to try to, get at it before it becomes a tremendous issue. So we try to look at the overall growth of that development and then see where it would best fit for what elementary school. It would also have to work well with transportation. It has to make sense because we're on a tiered busing system. So we always try to look at that. We're not really alarmed with the general ed numbers right now because, as you can see from an 18-month period, it was really only an additional 30 students overall. But we do monitor the class sizes all the time, and we work with the principals to make sure if there's any pockets or bubbles, we try to address them creatively with maybe another grade is not as high as it was, and we try to maneuver it that way. So I haven't seen such an alarming issue yet where, because I know years ago when you were here, there was trailers, right? There was trailers of students. I don't, and there's 6,000 students. I don't believe we're gonna get to that number based on the number of units and how big they are.
Okay, thank you.
One other question. The 40, while you're on the bottom of the page, right? The pending note that says there are 45 pending referrals. Can you explain what the 45 is? Are those 45 pending IEPs? Are they?
So within the 45 referrals, it depends on, after evaluations are completed, whether or not the child is eligible for special education. So the child, even though they might have a diagnosis, they might end up going down the 504 route, they might end up with an IEP, they might end up with nothing. So those are just 45 referrals that were put through, either it was parent referral or through INRS that we are then now evaluating.
So at some point, some percentage of those 45 will become part of the 775
Yes.
and raise the 775 to a higher number.
Yes. But it will decrease the general ed population number, correct? Janet?
Yeah, that's the total.
Total doesn't change, it's just the cost of this, the
Right.
cost of the education changes
That was
and
really
the
just-
funding.
That was really just to try to pinpoint the percentages of special ed compared to total enrollment, but also that number doesn't account for anybody that moves in over the summer that may require certain services that we need to provide, and that count would also increase, not just by the referrals.
Do you plan for the 45 or do you plan for a percentage of the 45?
So what I have right now when I do my projections is that I know every child that is referred, and I know where they would be if they were landed into needing a program. That was all discussed with my child study team already, and then discussed with administration as needed. So I know the students, whether or not they'll be eligible or not, that's another conversation as we go, but that's how we run it. So I know the students, we know where they possibly could be, I know the buildings that they're in, and we kind of go from there.
Thank you.
Okay. So just some important factors regarding special education. So out-of-district students, we had 21 students. We're anticipating having 17 students. But that didn't stop from the budget from increasing, because when the estimated tuition rates come out for the private schools, they're higher than they were the previous year. So when you start to add them up that you still have, it's slightly up from what it was, even though the population's down, just because of just tuition going up. Instructional assistants, we're projecting an increase of 8 full-time instructional assistants, and that's really due to just the changing student needs, whether it's students that move in, students that get their IEPs reevaluated and they need one-to-one intensive support. So that is something that is mandated. Once it's in the IEP, you cannot take it out, you have to provide it. And also students that come into this district with needing one, we need to provide one as well. So right now I know Mrs. Tyrone's has been doing a lot of shuffling when it comes to just trying to make sure that we meet that requirement. The third thing, so right now we have an ERI class. It has been actually a great success. We've actually saved a lot of money that way from not having to send students out of district. We were able to keep them in and service them and provide them services that they required. And so what we're proposing is to actually establish 2 new ERI classes. One would be for, I believe, grades 1 and 2, or is it K through 1? I think I might have put that wrong.
It's K through 2.
K through 2, okay. And then the other one would be grades 6 through 8. Right now we have one for grades
2 through 5.
3 through 5. Okay. So basically doing this, because we're starting to see the increase and we're starting to expect the need, doing this would allow us to save money by keeping students in district that would possibly go out or would go out, and then also creating a revenue stream where it came to, if we have a program we can offer and we have spaces, other districts will send their students over and we can actually provide them services as well and collect tuition that way. And almost to try to offset some of the increased costs we've been seeing with out-of-district tuition or other areas of just the budget in general. Now, a lot of the times when that tuition comes in, if it's unexpected, it will go back to special education, but if it is expected, it really just hits revenue because it's been budgeted for already. The last one is your integrated preschool program. So we always pull numbers. We're just bringing this to the board. We always pull numbers from the neighboring preschools around us. We have been seeing increases in a lot of them. We also have to stay consistent with our increases due to the salaries that go up to provide, instruction to those classes. So what we're proposing here is, you'll see on a future agenda, is to go from 8,000 to 8,280. And again, we would work with the same payment plan structure we had in the past and what we set up. I know we had revised it, but we need to increase to make sure that we continue with not having such a huge gap between how much it costs to run the program and how much we're actually charging. We still are actually losing money. We just try to limit the damage so it doesn't get out of hand.
You mentioned for the ERI classes, when you give us the binder, will it show in there like how much we've saved, or because we brought students back here, right? So how we benefited, like are there going to be numbers in there that shows like the percentage or the amounts?
You'll see on the tuition side, you'll see we'll budget more for tuition, and when we explain the revenue side, we'll tell you that we're budgeting for an anticipated number of 4 or 5 additional students that we can come in, and that has caused our revenues to actually increase from the year prior. So we're anticipating an increase, that's good. And then what happens is that gets reflected back into the budget. So we will be able to break it down that way, where you'll be able to see numbers, and I'll be able to associate them with what they are. So we can show that.
The third bullet excites me, right? Because the fact that we are now growing the ERI program, that's a great statement. That shows that we are building the in-house capacity to do this and not sending so many students out of the district. That is a great statement. So thank you for that. That just made my day. It really did. It just made my day. And I know, we've talked about this, and the kindergarten one is not there yet, but I imagine at some point that may grow, and this is just really so spectacular. So thank you very much. I assume that there's a fiscal piece of this, right?
There is. Make no mistake about it. I had a conversation with Ms. Tyrone, what was it, late last week, and in reviewing this, because I was excited as well. But I wanted to make sure we were being, of course we want to bring everyone back into the district that we can, but it also, there's the other side of that. It needs to be fiscally responsible. And we sat down, we talked about it, and within 5 minutes she showed me how Marlboro will benefit financially from increasing our ERI program, both at the lower levels and carrying it up through the middle school. So we'll almost be fully covered, as you mentioned. We'll be covered 1 through 8, right? And then maybe eventually K at some point. So thank you for that hard work.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone, during her interview process, the excitement was palpable from Ms. Tyrone. She couldn't wait to come into the district and implement this program. She was almost giddy about it. So to see it even come to fruition is especially more rewarding, because this was her baby vision. And to sit here and see the budget and know that her dream is working and that her vision is coming to life it's super special to see. But not just because you're sitting next to me, but I'm just so proud of you.
Thank you for sharing that sentiment. I am legitimately excited about this, but I'm also excited about the piece that you just mentioned too. And when you say fiscally responsible, I assume that means the cost of the program is being offset by also out-of-district placements that are coming to Marlboro to help cover our costs, and that in itself is exactly what we can be doing to grow our internal value, not only to our students, but to be the place where other students come to. Congratulations. This is just spectacular. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this and the success of this. So really, congratulations.
And it's also mitigating potential costs. So, you know, without these programs, you're looking at an average tuition is anywhere from 60 to 100 grand. So if you didn't have these programs, you'd possibly be paying that per child that comes in that you would have to send out. So that's another way of looking at it compared to just the money that you would bring in from it. Uh-oh. I think I've been talking too much. Thank you, Michael. So this is, again, just to give you just a dollar-for-dollar overview from year to year. You'll see, of course, the added district tuition has increased because of the tuition increases that we're seeing from the state sheet. Your contracted online services have increased. Your consultants and evaluations have increased. Your supplies and equipment have increased. Your home instruction has increased basically due to need. So there's a lot more students that require home instruction services, so you have to budget accordingly for that. Your curriculum writing and your PD has increased, and then we have a decrease in textbooks. So you could see the overall total budget we're estimating at is increasing from 2 million to pretty close to a little over 2.4 million. This is not also counting for the $815,000 that we anticipate putting into the IDA grant that we usually offset at a district tuition. So if you're looking at a district tuition, you would add both those numbers and see that it's almost close to $2 million overall, but we're able to offset some of it. To the next slide, Michael. Thank you. So this is just to give you some detail of why they're increasing. So your added district tuition increases, of course, I went over, you have the projected 17 students. Of course, the count decreased by 4, but the estimates of the tuition rates have increased pretty drastically. And it's expected every year they go up at least 3 to 4%, so we budget accordingly for that. Your contracted online services have increased by $165,000. That's really due to the need of needing one-to-one nursing services, and again, that's built into your IEP, so there is unfortunately no way of cutting that. That is a service that we must provide to these students, and we're just seeing an uptick of that need, so we need to budget accordingly for that as well. And that's mainly for the out-of district students. Your consultants and the outside evaluations, it's really increased due to the additional services needed for students. So students that require a teacher of the deaf we're seeing are increasing, and so we need to budget accordingly for that increased need. And then also, I believe this includes the referrals too, right? The 45 students referrals, that service. So of course we try to just add into that because like we said, we're seeing an influx of special education students coming in. So we just want to make sure we plan accordingly and make sure we have the money needed to possibly have those evaluations done for incoming students. Your professional development is increasing by $47,000. This is really due to Orton Gillingham teacher training for the special education teachers. This would be a one-time infusion into the budget for this, and then after that it would just be on an as-needed basis as new teachers come in. So this would really just be a one-time budget cost. And then your supplies and equipment have increased by $56,000, and that's again another one-time cost. We're still navigating this, but the IA staff do need new Chromebooks. We're working with our tech department to maybe possibly be creative where this might not be necessary if there's some that are actually in very good shape for them to use, but we also don't want to just recycle old beaten ones in replace of beaten ones that they're trying to get rid of. So we try to just give them devices that they can utilize and work with that are operational in the school day. And then of course your startup supplies for the ERI sections. So your 2 new ERI sections will, of course you'll be making classrooms, we budget for those supplies accordingly. All right, so if you have any questions, you can email myself, Mrs. Gross, or Mrs. Tyrone, and if you don't find out what you're looking for, you could just repeat the list again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caravello. Well done, and Mrs. Tinarello, thank you also for your added information and great work. All right, we have some business opportunities to sort of cover here. Next on the agenda is the financial and business operations matters. Mr. Caravello? Are we?
So, sorry, what'd you say, finance and business?
Yeah.
Yeah, so someone needs to,
Oh, sorry,
to
you're right.
vote on that.
I didn't look down further. The harassment, imitation, and bullying report.
so we're just gonna ask.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm lost on my.
Do you want
on
me
my
to read
agenda
it?
here. Thank you very much.
Okay. The superintendent of schools submits the following resolutions for approval.
Wait,
One,
it's
harassment, intimidation, bullying report. Number two, travel. 3, approval of transportation agreement, case 959, 2024-2025 school year. I so move.
Thank you. Can I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Gandhi. Before we take a vote on this, just for the board members who are on item number 2 for travel, please note that you should abstain from voting on your own travel. But you can obviously vote on the rest. Mr. Caravello?
Okay, just before we take a roll call vote, so we are going to, under the number 2, travel. So for Mrs. Balomo to attend the Women's Leadership Conference, we are actually just removing that, so we will not be taking a vote on that. We'll be scratching that. So you can cross that out. Yeah, I believe just conflicting schedules and decided to go to the one up top.
Okay.
Okay, did we do discussion?
No. Questions or comments or discussion?
I do have a question. Some of us were waitlisted for the Women's Leadership Conference, and I know we're just approving it right now. We're not paying though, right, until we actually attend?
No, so when we actually do the sign-up process, they require a PO, so we do the purchase order, give them the purchase order number, but we don't make any payment yet until we know that you're going to the training.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just make a recommendation for that one? A question. So is there a set budget for board members to attend, right?
Yeah, there is.
And then is it possible for anyone that's attending these conferences to kind of just, do they write something up so that it could be circulated to the board? Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure.
It's actually the practice, right, that you request from us?
Yeah, anything that requires a reimbursement to you requires we require a write-up of what you learned, what you attended, the dates, and then we put that with the packet, the reimbursement packet.
You raised, I'm sorry, Kit. Ms. Mendez, you asked a question about someone who was waitlisted. Are you waitlisted or?
Annette, I only know of Annette and I because we just talked about it, so I did reach out to our rep via email and copied Vinny to ask, like, why? Because that's happened quite a few times to us already, and I'm not sure, because we send it right away. I know you apply, and I know this is across New Jersey, so I know we're not the only people asking to attend, but it has happened quite a few times.
Do we have enough time to add them to an agenda if they are added back, if they are able to attend, or can we take action tonight to say that subject to coming off the wait list, we've already pre-approved it?
So unfortunately, we cannot sign anybody up until they're approved fully by the board. So what happened in that instance is Mrs. Mendez, I believe, Mrs. Carrero, and Dr. Miskowitz, I believe there was 3 that wanted to, or maybe Mrs. Seward, but they wanted to attend the women's. Okay, they wanted to attend, so they had to get approved first, and then I go through the registration through school boards, and then at the end it said you've been waitlisted, and then you get the email stating that. So unfortunately, I can't sign any of these people up till tomorrow. I know for sure you'll probably be waitlisted for the women's leadership one if 3 members have already been waitlisted. For the other ones, I won't know until I complete the process of registration. If they are, then You stay on here as you've been approved, and if you get in, that's great. If you don't, you don't need to go back on the agenda to not be approved or be taken off. You just
But-
didn't go.
But Ms. Mendez is only on for the spring conference. I don't see her on for the women's leadership.
They were already approved at the prior meeting. There were
Thank
some
you.
on there. Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I was wanting to make sure of.
And, you know, that list that you sent us, that helps a lot, because this, you put yes if it's approved, correct?
Yeah, it's easier for us to
Yep.
keep track that way.
Yep,
This
yeah.
way we can not miss anybody, and there's no
Right.
delay in registration. 'Cause
And it showed me too where I, should be, that what things I've been already approved for, so I like that. Thank
Yeah.
you very much for
no
that.
problem.
So is there any other way that we could efficiently, I don't know, I guess like tentatively sign up for something before approval? Like, is there any way that we could change that process? Because sometimes the date comes out and then we don't have a board meeting for 3 weeks, so of course
happened
it's
to me
gonna
with
hit
the law one.
capacity.
Right.
So if you want to attend something on your own accord and you want to pay for it on your own and just go on your own, you're more than welcome to. But if we're going to utilize district funds, it has to be done this way.
That's great.
Unfortunately.
That's my question. If we want to just go ourselves, because that's happened to me now a few times, the law conference and so forth. If I just want to do it myself and pay out of pocket, I certainly can do that, correct? Okay.
Correct, yeah, and I know there's been talk about a blanket PO also. You could also always do a blanket PO, but individually, when someone decides to go to something that's offered, you have to get board approved if you're going to use district funds. Even if there was a blanket PO, this process would still have to be in place. It would just be easier on my end to just charge it to the blanket PO, so it's unfortunately still has to be this
What about-
I think the only recommendation would be most of these conferences plan at least a year in advance. Take a look at it, so you'll know what's gonna happen in 2026, for example,
If I
right?
knew my life a year in advance, I would definitely
But
go that route.
but you could always
But-
back out, right, and cancel and not
Can't we
pay for it.
reimburse them? if
That's
they
my
pay up
question.
front?
Yeah,
Can we do a
exactly.
reimbursement?
You can reimburse them, but you cannot sign up for the training until you get approved, if you're gonna use our
You mean
funding.
the NJSBA?
No,
will
if
not
they
allow
sign
it?
up personally, they pay for it personally, all right? Can they subsequently be reimbursed if we approve it in
That's
the
what I'm
budget?
asking.
But they
For
have,
that personal expense?
so they have to be approved on the agenda. So if we were to do that route, your name would have to be on the agenda to be approved, and then after you get approval, like literally the next morning, you could go and sign up, and then you show proof of payment that you've signed up, and you provide that to us. And that date, because they check that in auditing, that date
Okay.
has to match after approval. It cannot be before. If it's before, you're not going to get reimbursed, and we're actually gonna get dinged. No.
Yeah, we get locked out. It only
Yeah,
brings
sorry,
you
I'm
to a
just,
certain
I'm trying
point,
to
and then
explain
it
the
says
process so we
contact
get
your
all
VA.
the,
So, this is challenging, to say the least. Is there a way in January, knowing what people tend to sort of historically attend, that we pre-approve them in a January meeting? That says, this is what training has already been approved, the Women's Leadership Conference, the spring, we pre-approve people even if they're not registered yet? And
so we only do group registrations for big conferences. So like your annual one in school boards, we do a group registration. When that comes out, there's like an early bird thing. We put everybody on for approval. And that's like your blanket approval. As far as the individual conferences, like the webinars and the workshops, I don't check that schedule every day on the school board's website. I don't know about it. I only see that they come through email, or if you notify me that you want to come, and they're always different. I know not
They're
all of them
different
are always the
dates, yeah.
same every year, and they're always different dates.
Correct.
So,
I try to put as far as I can, like the one I have scheduled here for May, right? And because it caught my eye, the spring conference, it's pretty informative. But like the Strauss Esme Law Conference changes, right? The date is not always the same, so I couldn't project. But to your point, Brian, I think if we're foreshadowing on what we're going to attend, I think that's helpful. I try, but to that point, it's still, I have been shut out of a few things already.
I know.
But now you're doing, because I know you're doing it on
It's been like the second or
here.
third time that's happened. I guess due to the volume, maybe they don't anticipate the large volume. But I can, if all of you are diligent on what you want to attend, and then you attach to the sheet, we'll be diligent on making sure that it's on the agenda, so you can go and we'll sign you up. This way we do it clean and we have no issues, so Mr. Mulligan can stand up there next year and say, oh, we had no findings, because that's what we're all aiming for. Again, it's the process, but unfortunately, we don't even really put them on workshops. We put them on workshops just so there's no delay in possibly being in the waiting room again for that.
I would like to say something. I'm going to be voting no to line 5 and 7 for the Equity Expo Conference. When I was doing looking into some conferences for myself, I was hoping to look at that conference and see that it would include topics such as special education or ELL and how that's going to be integrated or exemplified or assisted in our district. Instead, I found that at that conference, the featured presenters were members of the DEI task force and speakers that were influencing school boards to deepen skills for developing socio-political awareness in schools and developing school practices about making equity plans for elementary schools. This is obviously something that I don't stand by, and I don't believe that politics belong in our schools. So for that reason, I cannot vote yes to approving district funding to, further education on how to bring that to the Marlboro School District.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussions? Let's call the vote.
Okay. Just remember to abstain from your name if you're on the travel. Dr. Miskowitz?
Yes to all except my name.
You're abstaining?
I'm abstaining for number 2. Yes.
Okay.
The items that affect you.
Yeah.
Yes, the one that applies to me.
Thank you.
Yes. Exactly what you told me to say. Whatever, yeah.
Mrs. Seward?
Yes to all except I guess number 2, where it applies to myself, and as well as the approval for the equity conference.
So you're abstaining from...
I don't know how to do this. It's like not.
So are you saying no to 5 and 7, or abstaining from 2, 5, and 7?
No, abstaining from 7, and no to 2 and no. 1, 2. I know it's confusing. I'm sorry.
You're number 6.
1, 2, 3,
Oh, sorry.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you.
So 5, 6, and 7.
Abstaining from number 6, and no to 5 and 7.
Okay.
And just so it's clear, the number 6 includes the original 6, which included Ms. Balomo.
Yes. Okay. Mrs. Balomo?
Yes to all. I'm abstaining from number 2 under travel, and then no to 5 and 7.
Thank you. Mrs. Carrero?
Yes to all, abstaining from myself, 4 and 5.
Okay. Mr. Hyatt?
Yes to all, abstaining from voting for myself.
Thank you. Mr. Alonsky?
Yes.
He made it very. I'm going to be interesting to find out how you sort of tally this afterwards.
Mrs. Gandhi?
I'm saying yes to all, and I'm actually particularly interested in learning more from people attending 5 and 7, because I'm sure there's going to be more discussed. It's a full-day conference than just a few topics, so thank you.
Mrs. Mendez?
Yes to 1 and 3, abstaining from number 2 for travel.
Okay, Mr. Cohen?
Yes to all.
Thank you.
Got what you need? Okay. Motion's passed. We'll move on to the next item, curriculum. Dr. Miskowitz, would you?
Before I read the motion, Mr. Balone, could you please explain to the people in the audience at home and in person so that they know it's transparent exactly what we're doing, please?
Sure. So under curriculum matters, there's the item number 1. It's entitled New Jersey Department of Education Equivalency Application. That's a fancy word for saying, so this applies to our CUSAC scores. This is a fancy way of saying that we will apply to be calculated under the new CUSAC calculations. Just a little history on this. Marlboro Township is considered cohort 3, which there are 3 cohorts of school districts that undergo CUSAC each year. So being that we're cohort 3, we're the last cohort to operate under the old rules. And when I say the old rules, the New Jersey Department of Education has recognized that the science test in particular is problematic. Students do not do well on it, and they realize there is an issue with that test. So they're in the process of making changes to that test. But they can't do that overnight. So what they've realized is that 75% of school districts in New Jersey will not pass CUSAC in instruction and program due to state testing. Yet we are the #1 performing state in the nation. So that doesn't make sense. So in order for them to ameliorate that situation immediately is to change the formula for calculation on state testing. Now, either way, Marlboro Township Public Schools would be okay in terms of passing for CUSAC, either using the old formula or the new one. The new formula affords us to score an additional 2 points. So it's not many, but we'll take as many points as we can get. So essentially what this is asking the board to approve is to be calculated under the new formula, which will be widespread across the state next year. Being that they're not implementing that officially across the state, across every cohort until next year, they're allowing for this equivalency application for that new formula to apply this year. And as you know, we just had a CUSAC visit today. So once we get this, hopefully we can get this approved, we can send it immediately off to the county and the state, and we'll operate under the same rules that everyone else will operate under next year and moving forward.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I appreciate you giving that explanation.
You're welcome.
Okay. Now I'll read the motion.
Go ahead, and then we can have discussion afterwards.
The superintendent of schools submits the following resolution for approval. Number 1, New Jersey Department of Education equivalency application. I so move.
Thank you. Second, Ms. Mendez, any discussions on this item? Any questions for Mr. Malone?
I just had one. I appreciated the thorough information that was sent in advance. That was actually very helpful. Just one question. Is there any, I understand all the benefits, anything we should be mindful of or pay attention, or you think it's just?
I wouldn't, so we should be mindful that if this is approved, that it puts us on a level playing field, I think, with all other school districts in New Jersey. Should we not approve the equivalency application, we will not be on an even playing field. So that's number 1. Number 2, when we're comparing our data from year to year, this will allow an apples to apples comparison, as opposed to, you know, using an old formula this year and then a new formula in 3 years from now. So those are the 2 big items that I think would really benefit us from approving this application.
Thank you.
Based on my background, we will get approved. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't, because it's leveling the playing field. So I don't see it, and this goes to the county suit, am I correct? So this, you know, it's up to the county superintendent. He knows Marlboro. He's here, so he knows what we're doing. And so this is a good thing for us, and it also just elevates us, even if it's 2 points. 2 points is 2 points. 2 points is 100 versus a 98. So let's go for it.
Procedurally, I think the answer is also, if we don't approve it tonight, we may miss the window of opportunity to get this approved by the county superintendent. Any other discussions, questions? Mr. Caravello, a roll call?
Mrs. Seward?
Yes.
Mrs. Palomo?
Abstain.
Mrs. Carrero?
Yes.
Mrs. Gandhi?
Yes.
Mr. Hyatt?
Yes.
Mr. Alonsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Miskowitz?
Yes.
And Mr. Cohen?
Yes. Okay. All right, moving along, we have old business. Any old business?
I do. Oh, go ahead.
Ms. Seward?
I am going to ask for an open discussion with Ms. Gandhi because I find it to be very frustrating from the perspective of the former chairperson of communications. I asked you more than twice for a write-up of what you and Dr. Miskowitz had participated in at the NJSBA convention in October, and you failed to deliver any sort of write-up so that I could share with the community what we all had done during that trip. So I just want to know what changed from not participating in the same exact request that you're asking the rest of us to provide in our travel versus your travel. I just can't help but figure out the difference between the two.
I can respond to that. No, I can respond to that. The stuff that when I go to a workshop, I write something up, I submit it to Vinnie.
No, this was in light of sharing with the community what the tax dollars were providing to board members to attend training.
And very honestly, I completely forgot all about it after.
Yeah, it was just one of our board goals to have an active Facebook account, to share happenings, and with something like NJSBA training in the capacity of spending an entire day.
I was looking at it from a different angle.
I wasn't even really addressing you because you weren't the one that asked for a write-up for the trainings that we attend now.
Oh,
This was
I
more
understand.
just what had changed from then till now, where it was not participation to requesting the same exact information that you didn't provide at the time. Was it just to not advance the communication committee?
Ms. Gandhi, do you want to answer, or?
Well, first of all, I would just tread very lightly in saying that I was trying to not advance the communication community or team or group.
Chairperson?
All last year, everybody attended many conferences. I didn't see one thing that was shared with the board. So this year, going into 2025, my request is to go ahead and make sure that if someone's attending a conference, that they do a write-up and that is shared within the board. That's it.
I think that's a good idea. I think what we write up for Vinnie could be shared. I don't have a problem with that.
Well, this was just more, it's the biggest convention of the year. We all travel down to Atlantic City. There's vendors that we meet. There's networking that happens. So I just thought, since there's no other social media representation at these conferences, that it would have been fair to share with the community what we all had achieved during those 3 days that were paid for by taxpayers. So it was only in light, and I didn't share fully what everyone had done because I didn't have full participation from everyone. So to be fair, I shared nothing.
Well, no, actually, that seems kind of silly to me. If you have participation from other members, why didn't, that was my next question, because I didn't see anything being shared. So you mean to tell me that when you had information from other board members that attended, you chose not to share that with the community because I didn't provide you with the information that you requested?
I think it's more in light of like collaboration. I was actually very proud of what I did on the NJSBA conference, and I shared it, you know, with a lot of people.
Right.
Pictures, write-ups, fun little synopsises of what I did when I was there. So if we're trying to move towards a collaborative front, I have no idea why we wouldn't all share and all be represented for our efforts.
Agreed. I'm actually surprised that that wasn't shared, what was, you know, what the other board members shared with you. So I almost feel like maybe I kind of saved some time. I don't know.
It's nice that you're trying to flip it, but it's just, you're very hypocritical.
Well, no, I'm just trying to understand. If you got information from other board members, which is you, there were at least 4 in total,
Because
why did you choose not to share that?
I asked,
So-
you didn't even, there wasn't even a response to say, I'm not going to share that with you. You responded with, like, yeah, I'll get to it. And then nothing was sent. And I asked again, just following up, would like to share with the community what
Great.
we have done.
Great.
I was very transparent, the purpose of this, and then because so much time had passed
So,
while I was waiting for
can
a
I-
response.
So in spirit of transparency, can you explain to me why the other board member
Yeah.
stuff was not shared?
In the interest of whether, and I appreciate you raising the issue, it sounds like there's
It's just very
an
petty.
awareness of it.
Agreed.
This was last year, we're into New Year, let's sort of find a better way to sort of,
how you admit it.
share,
agree.
and let's move forward. That's my suggestion. It's snowing out.
I agree.
Any other new business?
Yeah, there
okay.
is. So we had brought up policy 5756, and in light of what 5756 has meant, will continue to mean to parents, parental notification, parental rights, and the people who fought for 2 years' effort, with all of their effort, I find it a disservice to our community and to our students to allow this policy to sit any longer. Under policy 131, if the board so decides, we are allowed to suspend the policy until it has the ability to be added to the agenda. So I would like to make a motion to utilize that stipulation in 131, suspend the policy now until our next meeting, where it could be added to the agenda, and we can make a motion to either abolish it or do whatever the board decides to do with it. But I would like that to stand, that we do have the ability to suspend that policy from now until our next meeting, where it could be added to an agenda.
Just give us a second to take a look at the policy. Thank you.
Are you referencing I'm sorry. Are you referencing the emergency section? Okay. So what's the emergency?
This has been a community issue. Over 40 school districts have already had this policy abolished. The conjoined districts in our filing all have a plan going forward, like has been discussed, and our plan is to add it to the next agenda. So because we do have that liberty, we can, in fact, suspend the policy.
Well, I think that's the conversation. It's that, you know, is that better? Sorry. You're posing a motion before the board to, under the emergency provision of policy 131, that the board utilize that to sort of immediately suspend
Sure.
the policy of 5756.
Yes, until it can be added to an agenda. And for me, as a parent in the district of 3 young kids, the emergency is, we have fought tirelessly, and right now, I do not have the right to notification as the policy stands, and it is an emergency for me to gain that right back, since the state of New Jersey has said that we can.
Okay.
I would just like to add one thought to that, because I know under emergency, when we've used that once before, I think it was a year or so ago, when we had to do the threat assessment team, they came in, and the sick leave. At that point in time, those fell under something that they said, you can put those through immediately. You don't have to go through first and second. So,
Are you amending the motion, or?
no, I'm asking a question and
Okay,
building upon
thank
it.
you.
No one seconded.
Because no one's seconded yet, that's what I was asking.
Well, we're still talking about
Okay.
it. Do you want me to have to second it before I could talk about it? No, I know, I just wanted to make sure. So just the thought is, I know people are like, what's the emergency, or what isn't it, or whatever it might be. I think it's because we finally, after years, have the ability to do something where it sat, and it was a lot. There was a lot of community members and non-community members, and I think whether you agree that it's not technically an emergency, right? We put sick leave in there, and I understand there was state law that came, pieces of that, or statutes, and then the threat assessment team, different from this, but this was a big impact on our town and our community. And so I can understand the concept. So if you're asking for a second, then I will second the motion on that, because there was a lot of feeling and sentiment and families that came out. Whether they agreed or not, there were a lot of people that came out, and so I second the motion.
That's fine. I would like to say that I have no problem suspending this for a couple weeks. Proposes no issue. We had a thorough discussion in executive session where we could have had this conversation and come out here with a motion to suspend this. I don't know why it's being brought up at this moment when the purpose of executive was to all align and agree on this. But that's just my sentiment. So I have no problem.
I agree with you on
this.
that. I agree with you on that, Chad, because we had a very extensive conversation. We aligned on moving forward in executive, and that's why we put forward what we did. So I'm not understanding why this is coming up right now, and I still need to understand from Mr. Gross, would this fall under the emergency to actually do this?
Sure.
Yes.
Now, if you're asking me my legal opinion, we're gonna have to go back in executive session.
We can, but we're going to go back into
We can,
session.
but I have to go back in executive session for me to give you my legal advice as to whether you should proceed, not proceed.
I don't think we need an executive session. I think we can suspend this for a couple weeks. That's my opinion.
Any other further discussions about this? Just to be clear, so everyone's clear, right? The motion is to, under the emergency provision of policy 131, to suspend only 5756 until the next meeting.
Right, it's suspend it until it can be added to the agenda.
I think the word emergency can be objective here. Having lived through the controversial meeting where 5756 was first voted on, and then being asked by Marlboro PD if it was necessary that we have police monitoring and presence in front of our homes, it's hard to imagine that this now 18 months later, since our hands were tied on it, and also being a parent of children in the district, it's hard to say what constitutes an emergency suspension.
I have to ask both Mrs. Seward and Mrs. Belomo, where was this conversation when we're talking in front of our attorney in executive?
She can change her mind.
I just want to
What you
say
just said.
a few things. First thing is that the conversation, somebody could have an hour plus to think about where they stand. They don't have to share it. And they don't
Well,
have
I was
to-
just being
now-
questioned
no, no,
about thinking
I
one way
understand.
last year
I
about our
understand.
Congress
Dee Dee, quite on,
attendance
quite honestly,
versus
this is not,
today.
this is not me versus you, or
I
you
just
versus
wanna,
me.
I'm not,
Just
right,
vote.
I'm
You could
not,
just vote
Can-
no.
I'm
if
not
that's what you
against,
want.
I
Wait,
just
wait,
wanna,
let Ms.
Thank you, I
Mendez
didn't
has
finish
the
it.
floor.
Thank you.
I'm recognizing her. Please let her finish her comments, and then we'll take comments
Thank
from
you.
everyone else.
I'm not attacking anybody. I think genuinely what I'm saying is that somebody can not share something in executive and make a decision when they come out here and change and express their feelings. I do recall a similar executive session where we got guidance from the attorney, a former attorney, about something that was proposed. And then you came out and proposed it, completely negating what was said, and you didn't share in advance with us either. So I'm not, that's your right to do so. I'm not even questioning it. But again, your internal review.
I don't think this.
I'm sorry, let me just say one thing. I'm not going to talk any more about it. I don't want to attack anybody. I don't want to ever live in that space. I just want to say, anybody out here has the right to express how they feel. They don't have to pre-share it. They don't. It's nice if we can collaborate. I'm with you. I've asked for that since last year. But sometimes maybe you don't. Maybe you change your mind and you have an opinion, and that is okay too, for all of us. So I'm with you. I second it. I respect everybody's opinion, but that's it.
Thank you. No. Ms. Palomo, and then Ms. Gandhi, if you had anything to follow up on?
I'm okay.
I'm going to work my way around. Thank you. Ms. Palomo, Ms. Gandhi, if she has anything to follow up on, Mr. Hyatt, Mr. Lalansky, and then Ms. Carrera.
I guess the only thing that I want to say is that the beautiful thing about being one member on a board is that we're all able to make our own decisions. This is just something that I feel very, very strongly about. I am forever grateful for the people who fought the fight when I wasn't on the board and then continue to fight it. And it's just something that I couldn't leave here tonight knowing we had the ability to suspend and we failed to do so. So after thinking it over, it is my right as a sitting board member to make a motion, and that is what I'm doing. And if you don't support it, you have every right as well to just vote no.
Thank you. Mr. Hyatt.
I was going to respectfully ask we move to vote, but I didn't see other hands up, sorry.
Thank you. You bring up the last, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Lansky, then Ms. Carrero, she has, nope, she has, so Mr. Lansky, then Dr. Niskowitz.
For me, executive session is going to take 5 minutes. The attorney has something to say. I'll be an abstain until I hear from what my attorney has to say about this, because he has something to say. And I think as a board, we have an attorney to make a vote. And I'm with doing it. I want to do it, but I want to hear from the attorney whether we should do it or not.
Let's
So
go.
before we go to executive session, can you just confirm that the board has the right to declare whatever each individual member feels is an emergency situation for a suspension? We can decide that. There's nothing in our bylaws, our policy, or the law that stipulates what an emergency or defines what an emergency, well, it would be our bylaws, because some school districts don't even have this in their bylaws. But there's nothing in our bylaws or policy, to the best of your knowledge, that defines an emergency. You can't acknowledge, you can't. Okay.
Because it's not a yes or no answer.
So there could be law that dictates that what an emergency would be as per our policy. Is kind of what I'm asking.
I think we have to go into executive session to answer the question.
Can I
Dr.
make a
Niskowitz.
motion to go into executive?
Sorry?
Can I make a motion to go into executive?
We'd have to table first the motion that's on, go into exec, and then come back out.
Okay, I'll make a motion to table what is on the table and go into executive. It's two things. Do I have to do one?
Motion to table first.
Okay, make a motion to table.
Mr. Lansky, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
Mo-
carries.
Motion to go into executive.
Second?
Do we finish old business?
Attorney-client privilege.
Yes.
But we do that right now,
For
or do we finish old business?
attorney-client privilege.
Do we finish old business before we go, or we go right now? Because I got
We
more.
can do whatever we want. If we have more old business, we can finish the old business and then leave.
Okay, I have more old business.
All right, so let's just complete the motion to go into exec after old business. So, seconded was by whom? Ms. Gandhi? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone, any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We will go into exec as soon as we complete old business. Any other old business?
Yes.
Mhm.
We have now been post-reorg for well over a month, about a month. And we have a committee, that's the Technology Committee. It is a standing, not ad hoc committee. And that committee does need to be seated. It is required. We have voted on it. The board decided that this committee was necessary, and it is a standing committee. So at this time, I know that there was discussion leading up right after reorg, that we needed a plan. I believe that we are doing a disservice to the students of Marlboro to not attack technology, AI policies surrounding it head-on. We are far behind where other districts sit with their AI policies. I've read many districts' AI policies and technology plans, and I'm not comfortable where we sit in the landscape of AI and technology. So with that being said, I would like to make a motion that the Technology Committee is seated immediately, and since there seems to be no plan, I would like to make a motion that I can chair that committee. That we make that we seat the Technology Committee immediately, and if there's no plan, that I'll chair that committee.
I'm sorry, but
I guess that wouldn't be part of the motion, but that the Technology Committee be seated immediately.
So before we have a discussion on it, second, Ms. Seward, discussion. Mr. Lansky, did you have, no? Anyone for discussion? So I will question whether or not a motion can, whether or not the policies are aligned with this motion, because I understood that the board president
that's why my question was.
seats
That's why I want to know what the
committees.
motion is. The motion is for the technology committee to be seated immediately. Who's on the committee?
No one.
That's
I
my
have not
point, so
seated anyone on the
I'm not
committee.
sure I'm understanding what the motion is.
We have a committee that was formed and voted on. This committee needs to exist.
I got
It doesn't exist.
point taken. What's the motion?
That we have the committee formed and seated immediately. It's not an ad hoc committee. It's not one needed. This is a standing committee.
If your motion is to have the board president fill the positions immediately.
Sure.
I guess that's a motion that would be,
Perfect. That's, you can amend it to say that, please.
the board president has to appoint people under the policy.
Beautiful.
So is the motion amended to reflect that?
Sure.
Is there a second?
Could you repeat the motion? I had to use the
I'm not sure what
restroom.
immediately means either. That means right now,
So every other committee,
right after the motion is passed.
so every other committee
I
has
showed
been
interest
seated.
in that committee, actually. That was one
I,
of the
that
committees
was
that I
mine,
showed interest in
that was one of my
as well.
top committees as well. And, you know, as per our bylaws and our policy, board policy, you know, standing committees should be seated at reorg. So the fact that one was devoid any members being, you know, seated there, I think that it's in the best interest of the students, the district, and our board to seat a technology committee.
I'm just trying to be as clear as we can be.
So as amended, is there a second? Ms. Seward. So discussion again on this motion, because I'll weigh in on this one if you'd like.
That's what discussion has. I want to hear you weigh in.
Thank you. So I looked at the description of the technology committee, and I agree with Ms. Palomo that there is a desperate need for this district to have a technology plan, and there is a desperate need for this district to have policies associated with the use of technology, right? But the technology committee doesn't create the plan, okay? The technology committee is not empowered in the board's bylaws to create the plan. It is empowered to the superintendent to create the plan.
But it
Okay.
is your
If
responsibility.
I can just finish, okay, please, if I can just finish.
Oh, I
Sorry.
thought it was a discussion.
So I believe personally, as a member of the board, that the best approach for this board is to sort of consider a technology plan policy, all right? And I have actually been, you know, working on one based upon my national experience with education and technology at a K through 12 level, all right? And, you know, I'm prepared to propose that and submit that to the policy committee for them to consider. So in light of the confusion that a draft policy would have with the role of a technology committee, I exercise the power that I believe the president has in deciding whether or not to seat the committee or not. So that's my discussion. I'm open for questions.
The committee is not an ad hoc committee. This is a standing committee with no
There's
members.
Nothing in the
thing.
bylaws, I believe, that compels the president to actually fill a committee.
So as the board president, you've made the sole decision to not seat a committee that the board had voted on and stands in our policies as a standing committee. You just chose to do that.
And also be the
Since that-
sole writer of the policy.
I'm the
without
sole
any-
writer.
Oh, I'm
the
not the sole
policy
writer of
without
the
it being
policy.
proposed.
I've actually consulted with others.
But
But
it
how
should
come
be
you
the
haven't
technology
consulted with
committee that you
everybody?
consult with.
No, it doesn't
I
actually
haven't
say that.
even, so
You
you're
wanna
acting
work
independently
collaboratively?
of the
Wasn't that your
board.
whole mission here?
I am working
Collaboration,
collaboratively.
remember?
Our
I am-
votes
I am
all
work-
weigh the same. I need to remind everyone of that. You are one of 9.
Yes.
You don't have any more power than anyone else does when it comes to passing policy or voting on a budget. We are
That's
all
true.
equals here. So
That's right.
you're proposing a policy with the policy committee for a technology plan without a technology committee. I just want to be clear.
We propose lots of policies in this board without committees. So the fact that I am proposing a policy for the policy committee to consider that then would come to the full board for vote is no different than any other policy that this board considers.
Was it always your intention to not seat a committee for technology? Then
Always my intention.
Wouldn't we have to vote
Yeah, 'cause
to
you asked
abolish
for
that
interest.
committee since it was voted in by the board? It's voted in.
And it was one of the
it's one
committees
of our
that you asked if you were
choices.
interested in.
as
These are
I,
two separate
And then you
discussions.
independently,
I think these are two separate
Can I
discussions.
just ask what I think I missed and you must have missed? Because I asked Chad what we missed. Are we voting on something too? I just want to know what I'm supposed to be
I
voting
just
on.
want the technology committee filled.
Oh, gotcha,
Because
okay.
it's a standing committee
The
that our
the motion
board
is that the
had
technology
voted on.
committee, that the board president appoint members of the technology committee immediately.
So I'm just trying
Oh,
to
gotcha.
understand and break this down to layman's terms. You decided, you just didn't want the committee anymore, so you didn't seat it without consulting the board, without making a motion to abolish the committee. You just decided independently that this isn't one you wanted to fill, so we're not gonna fill it today. I don't believe that's how reorg works, and I don't believe that that's in the best interest of this district when we sat here and voted it in with the bar straight across, unanimously voted in this committee, and then you became the president and said, well, I don't want to sit that one, so I'm just going to forget about it. That's not how it works.
Is the plan to never seat this, or are we going to propose like some sort of abolishing it? I know we haven't seen the technology policy that you had drafted. I know our first meeting is Thursday. I'm assuming we'll see it then. I haven't seen that yet, but is that the plan, that you want to abolish it, or are we never seating people? I don't know.
I actually, the plan was to require the superintendent to develop a comprehensive strategic technology policy that the full board would vote on, and that it would be done contemporaneously with the presentation of budgets so that technology and budget can be considered at the same time.
But here we are in February, and until I brought this motion up, this is the first I'm hearing about any plan regarding technology. This was not forgotten, obviously it was thought about, but only by one person and whoever you chose to collaborate with. And this was a board decision to implement this committee. And again, you acted independently of the board and decided that you weren't going to seat it. That's not the way it works. We're a board of 9. We voted this in unanimously. You're the president. Your job that you took oath to do is to reorganize this board into the committees that are standing committees. These are not as-needed committees. This isn't after your plan, before your plan, during your plan committees. These are standing committees of our board that we voted on as a board, and then you independently decided you were not going to follow through on.
Just so I'm clear, you have sole discretion to seat committees with who that's our policy. Am I wrong about this? Or
As I understand the policy.
We as a
and
board don't
as
vote
described
to
and
seat
as
committees. We as a
explained
board-
to me, the board president has the discretion of seating committees.
so the
But
logical,
not choosing what committees we have.
the
I
logical,
think the piece, though, I understand what you're saying, Chad, that is in the policy for the committees. The only thing is that I guess the decision to just leave a committee leave a committee that was approved and voted on with no members, and the decision to not do anything with the committee, I think, yes. I mean, is it the sole discretion of the president? Yes, it's in the policy. But
we go.
the point is that, does it feel collaborative as we're saying we want to be? No, I think we should have an open discussion of future state. Now, I don't know your plan, right? So maybe you're like, hey, I was going to bring that to the board. But I think just at least informing to say, here's the thought, what do you all think, I think is helpful.
And all of that actually doesn't matter, because in our policy, our board policies, it says that we have a standing technology committee that was voted on in a public meeting where we unanimously voted to have this committee. So the board members, the decision makers, voted that this was important to have. So one independent board member doesn't just get to decide he doesn't feel it's relevant, so he's not going to sit the committee. It's in our bylaws, it's in our policy. These are standing committees. And if you don't want to fill the committee, then I volunteer to serve as the sole member of the committee if no one else is interested. But we have the committee served a purpose. We wrote a description of the committee before it was voted in, and that committee needs to serve the students and families of Marlboro.
Why wasn't this one of the topics shared in the weekly updates that we get from you?
I'm sorry?
We've been getting weekly updates from you as board president every Monday with, things to keep us privy to and updates after speaking with Mr. Ballone, which, sidebar, we used to hear from Mr. Ballone, and that has suddenly halted. But why wasn't this plan to pause the seating of the technology committee because you were moving forward unbeknown to the policy committee that you were writing a policy with administration or leaving it up to administration? I know that you're nationally known for your technology skills and talents, but why not communicate that with us? Your plan for the technology committee.
The policy committee hasn't even met yet. They haven't even had their first meeting yet. So, you know what? I'm drafting a policy, not writing a policy.
But that's not your job. That's the job of the policy committee.
No, it's any
How
board.
do you know that's a policy the committee even wants to visit? That's a decision that needs to be made by the policy committee, not by you independently. And I have a real concern that board leadership is acting independently of the full board.
I disagree. I think what's more important is we now have in motion a 3-year technology plan that Brian just mentioned. It should
But
be
how
in
do we have
concert
that
with
in
the
motion
committee.
when we don't even know about it?
You will. It's
I
not being
mean,
hidden.
we will? We will?
He just
We're
outlined
in
the
reorg.
process. This
And
discussion
I'm
is
sorry, Mr.
devolving
Hyatt, but I have to say
can I please
that
finish?
you and I just had an
Yes, I can.
exchange regarding polling locations where you replied to my email where I asked you to please explain how the project failed and why we're still at the same point we were, 8 months ago, and you responded to me that it requires relationship building, civility leadership, solution-oriented mindset, and some creativity. And based on the tone of my response, you're concerned that we don't align, and so you're going to pause our conversation.
Yes.
Again, that's not your decision.
To pause the conversation with you?
To pause
The conversation's
conversation on
two-way.
polling
I'm pausing this
locations.
conversation. This is unproductive.
Well, you don't have the right to pause me.
He
I don't
has
have
a
an
right.
off button, and you don't have a right to pause me. These are real
I
concerns.
have a question. What is your
As a board
solution for the
member-
boarding? I want to know,
as
because
a
I've
board-
heard you
I'm
complain,
still
but I've never
speaking.
heard you come up with a recommendation on how to move polling out of our schools.
Deny
It is
the building use
great-
forms.
It is great to sit there and come up with ideas, but a real leader comes up with solutions, which
I
I have
just-
yet to see from you.
I mean, thank you for coming to the meeting tonight, but there is a building and facility use form that can just not be approved. Our buildings and how the facilities are used is based on I know this is crazy. I filled out about 150 of them in my lifetime. I can show you the form if you want to know about them, but we decide and dictate how the Marlboro Township buildings are used.
We have a motion.
I could say, I am concerned that this board is acting independently of the full body. That is my
Thank you.
concern.
Thank you for expressing the concern. Mr. Lewanski, you have the floor.
Okay. Mr. Cohen, you spoke that you're working on a plan. You're working on a technology plan. There's a technology committee. It has not been abolished. You're right. But I would like, if you would like to amend your motion, that at least give Mr. Cohen a week to our next meeting to make I don't think it
I am
serves the
very
board to make
reasonable.
it in 10 seconds.
No, I didn't ask for him to make it in 10 seconds.
immediate.
Just seated immediately, the same way the other committees. He has the forms. We filled out the surveys. He has the write-ups for the desire to be on the committee. He has the same information that he had to seat all the other committees, but this one specifically was not, seated. And I find it to be alarming, seeing that during Mr. Cohen's time as a civilian and not a board member, there was so much discussion around not having a technology plan that the one committee that we wouldn't seat is technology, and it gives me the feeling of exactly what was confirmed tonight, that people are acting alone and not as a board. And if you want to use words like collaboration, that is the complete opposite, and I urge the community to take notice to the lack of collaboration in actual actions and not just verbiage and what we're saying at meetings.
Mr. Cohen, I have a question. I think you expected all of the board members to provide you with some goals for the committees and why they wanted to be part of the committee. Are you able to share if any goals were shared by any of, I know Mrs. Bullen was very passionate about this.
I wrote 8 paragraphs about it.
I'm curious about it.
In case you want to know, 8 paragraphs.
The answer is that in the goals associated with those who are interested in the committees, many of the board members had expressed what they would hope to accomplish, yes. So in that initial effort, yes, they did.
I just,
And I would just like, yeah, Mr.
I
Lawrence.
just want to make sure, Daniel, you're okay with, he does not to give the committee tonight. It could be like, he goes home and thinks about it, gets back to us for the next meeting, correct?
Yeah, I just want it seated. I just want some action moving forward, whatever it is. We are behind other districts in our AI and technology. It is important for my children, for everyone else's children, and for all the children that we have technology that is moving at the same pace as the students that they will eventually have to compete against for high school and for college. We cannot be behind on that now. The AI plan for policy, I was on the policy committee last year, I was removed this year, but the AI plan has been in action for almost a year. We need tangible results. We need a plan forward. And I think the technology committee would be great. I don't think it should be the same people as the policy committee. I think that technology is the way of the future. It is the way of the present. And I think that as many minds as you could have at a round table talking about technology would be great.
Thank you. Any other discussions? Let's move on the motion. We'll reread the motion.
To have the board president appoint members of the technology committee immediately.
With immediate being qualified by Mr. Lalansky before the next meeting.
Perfect.
As amended. Second?
We have that.
Thank
I think Ms. Seaworth seconded. You're okay with that amendment, replacing immediately with by the next meeting? Next meeting is
February 25th.
February 25th.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's next week. You have a week off.
Yep. Okay, let's call the roll.
Okay, roll call for a tech committee to be seated immediately, and a chair appointed by the next meeting
Got to change immediately.
on 2/25/25, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Mrs. Carrero?
Yes.
Mrs. Gandhi?
No.
Mr. Hyatt?
No, it should be up to the discretion of the board president.
Mr. Lalansky?
Yes.
Mrs. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Miskowitz?
Abstain.
Mrs. Seward?
Yes.
Mrs. Belomo?
Yes.
And Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, motion passes. Would we like a weather committee? Because it's getting very nasty outside.
Any other old business? If there's no other old business, we're going into exec, and then we come back out again for new business, public comments, and then adjournment. Unless you'd like to do public comments now. Is there anyone here for public comments? Anyone like to speak? Nope. Motion to close public comments. Dr. Miskowitz, second, Ms. Gandhi. All in favor? Any opposed?
Executive session will be 5 minutes.
Yep, so we are going into exec.
5 minutes, if not sooner.
Mr. Caravella?
Mrs. Palomo?
Here.
Mrs. Carrero?
Still here.
Mrs. Gandhi?
Here.
Mr. Hyatt?
Here.
Mr. Alansky?
Here.
Mrs. Mendez?
Mrs. Mendez.
Mrs. Mendez?
Roll call.
Sorry, here.
Dr. Miskowitz?
Here.
Mrs. Seward?
Here.
And Mr. Cohen?
Here. Okay, before we broke for exec, we had a motion in front of us that was tabled. That motion was from Ms. Palomo, and the motion was to, under policy 131, to exercise under the emergency powers of the board to suspend policy 5756 until it can be on the agenda for the next board meeting. Is that correct? That motion was tabled. We're putting it back on, so I need a motion to move it, to put it back on the
Do we have
table. Thank you.
discussion first or no?
First motion to put it back on.
Perfect. Yes.
Second? Is there a second? Ms. Seward, thank you. All right, any other discussion?
The vote that's forthcoming is under the pretense that I did the best I could to understand executive session, but due to being attacked for my opinions, I can only understand what I can understand from executive session and what I got out of our legal counsel.
Any other discussion?
I think what you were saying, I'm like trying to decipher what advice was given to us by legal counsel also. So I just want to say that I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, Mr. Gross, and for the discussion. I think I'm torn on that because I think I'm in both ways, right? We were there, we lived it. To us, there was a lot that happened. So I think the word emergency is a little bit subjective. It's not defined by a regulation per se that said this is the criteria. So I could see, you know, of us living it and all the things that transpired. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Gross, for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion before we take a vote? Okay, let's, all in favor of the motion?
Roll
Oh,
call.
we're going for roll call.
Roll call, yeah.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mrs. Carrero?
No.
Mrs. Gandhi?
No.
Mr. Hyatt?
No, and I just want to make a statement. I very much want this on the agenda for our next meeting to abolish, rescind it, whatever you want to call it. I do not think this is an emergency, and I don't want to risk our ability to put that on the agenda and get rid of it. That's my statement. Thank you. I vote no.
Mr. Alansky?
I was going to say what Chad said, so no for me as well, for the same reasons.
Mrs. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Miskowitz?
And I agree with what Mr. Hyatt said also, and I vote no.
Mrs. Seward?
Yes.
Mrs. Palomo?
Yes.
And Mr. Cohen?
For the similar reasons that Mr. Hyatt, Mr. Lolansky, and others have said no, I vote no, and will add the fact that while we don't have a description or a clear definition of the word emergency, I don't know if this escalates to that level for the board's power, so I vote no.
Okay, so that's 6-3. Motion does not pass.
Motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor? All right, good night, people, and